We have a conversation with what we call a wisdom elder, and our wisdom elder is the Reverend Dr. Byron, who is the Associate Dean here at Howard University School of Divinity, and a full professor in New Testament, and have for years been one of the vanguard voices in New Testament studies. We've known each other quite a while. We don't start dating ourselves, but
we were struggling students
together.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Way back when, yeah. Lord have mercy.
The 90s.
In the 90s. And we want to thank God for the fellowship, for the Fund for Theological Education.
We received scholarships together.
Right.
We would meet up at the SBL meeting that many Howard students were able to attend. That's when I first met Dr. Bridgeman. Yeah. We were at an SBL meeting, and Dr. Renita Weems took us out to lunch one time. And that's when the seed was planted.
Right, and she is one of both of our major mentors. I can't say enough about how much of a mentor Dr. Renita Weems has been, I think, for both of us over the years. So what we're going to do now is have a conversation that you are free to interrupt, but you have to interrupt by raising your hand if you want to ask questions. Now let me tell you this before we get started. Yes, there will be preaching later on this afternoon. I do not want you to spend this time thinking about your preaching. Right now, this would be the time where you let whatever you've been thinking about percolate. Let it go. Just drop it. So that you can now listen in on a conversation where you might actually hear something that might help you get to where you're trying to go. So one of the things that I said, I'm just going to call you Gay, call me Valerie. Yeah, because that's how we know each other. I can't be calling you Dr. Byron all the time. It's just too hard.
Okay, try to keep it together so we can just talk.
Okay. So one of the things that I just got through saying to one of the groups was that part of the reasons that I think that we aren't able to preach prophetically is we are afraid of questions. So we go to the text trying to get a sermon rather than literally interrogating the text. And that many of us have grown up in systems where asking questions is seen as sinful. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's hitting the nail right on the head. Because for me, I think the hardest part was trying to understand the whole notion of exegesis and hermeneutics and the way that it was introduced to me in this Eurocentric historical critical framework that we were introduced to in seminary. And so our professors told us, well, okay, there's a period where you raise questions, but that kind of came at the tail end of the process. And what Valerie and the rest of the team here are trying to introduce to you and encourage you to do, which many of you already know to do it, but we often look for some other expert to define what the problem is or to generate the questions, when in fact we already can see the problem, the problems that are all around us, and we already know the questions that are burning in our hearts. So for me, the first step in the hermeneutical process, if you will, is to bring your questions to the table.
Right.
No matter how crazy they may sound, no matter how obvious they may be. Sometimes you're kind of like, well, doesn't everybody else see this? So it's like an obvious thing, but sometimes we're not even dealing with the obvious questions that are right in front of us. And so for me, that's how I've been able to define my scholarship, which deals with Black people in the Bible, specifically Egyptians and Ethiopians in the Bible, because I was concerned about the ways in which Ethiopian women, and often depicted as Black women, were seen as these negative images and negative tropes for the advancement of what the church fathers were trying to do. And so I came through in my PhD program and said, why is this going on? And why have no other scholars found this problematic? And what tools can I use to get answers for what I saw as outright offensive language about black women in the Bible.
Right. And see, for me, because we have, so my work, as you know, is in womanist hermeneutics, trying to figure out how to think as someone who has feminist, womanist questions around systems. It, for me, is always around a system. Who's being oppressed? Why? Whose voice don't we hear in this text? Why? You know, why is Elizabeth's voice not heard when Zechariah is singing about their child? Why does the group require Zechariah to tell us what John's name is, even though Elizabeth has already said the child's name is John? Why? You know, these are the kind of questions that, you know, and how does that play out to people who then tell us things like, don't ask questions?